Tatalia is the kingdom of the Mandlanders in western Ardagrish. It is mainly made up of swamps and is home to several dangerous kinds of wild beasts. This is the story of this nation's war for independence. Tatalia, formerly known as the Madlands, was part of the great empire of Rakadun. When Tarnum, the barbarian war chief, started battling the wizards of Rakadun to gain independence from the empire, he enslaved the inhabitants of the Madlands. Tarnum ruled as the tyrant king for a while, until Ryan Griffonhard killed him in a duel and the upstart nation of Erathia was forged. Under the new regime, the Madlanders remained slaves for many years. During the reign of Mad King Griffonhard, the ancestors sent Tarnum to free the Madlanders from Erathian slavery. Disguised as a beastmaster, he entered the swamp with a sword in his hand to shatter the chains holding them down. His first foe was Lord Onsten, a cruel Erathian lord who treated his slaves worse than most. With the aid of the slaves he freed, Tarnum managed to overcome the Erathian forces of Lord Onsten, a victory that made him known as Tarnum Hopewielder. After Tarnum killed the brutal Lord Onsten, the lords of Erathia grew more concerned about the slave uprising and sent more troops after them, led by Baron Paglon. In the meantime, fearing that the freed slaves could become another bloodthirsty horde under his command, Tarnum asked one of the Gnoll leaders, Brelik, to gather a few of the wisest members of the camp to write a set of laws. But when the witch Adamina arrived in camp, Brelik happily handed over the task. The Mandlanders defeated the Baron's forces in the area, but Paglon fled from his castle when Tarnum's army approached it. Tarnum learned that the king had promised a reward of 10 silver for the head of any escaped slave, and many rogues were now haunting his army. The atrocities that ensued were of great proportions, and many slaves lost their lives during these raids. Tarnum's retribution was swift, as he managed to defeat both Baron Paglon and the rogue hordes. Tarnum knew that the Madlanders needed a wise, compassionate leader when he would eventually leave them, and decided that a swamp boy named Droglo was the perfect candidate, a human boy who had been raised in the swamp and fought the Erathians all his life, but still showed mercy when he could. Eventually, Mad King Griffonhard sent his oldest son Niven to deal with Tarnum and his rebels. Niven was considered a great tactician, even though he was barely 16 years old, and decided to remove the bounty on the heads of escaped slaves and put a large bounty on Tarnum instead, intending to take out the snake's head. Mad King Griffonhard had secretly sent his son there to die, since he considered the prince far too soft on the slaves. Weighing his options, Tarnum snuck into Niven's camp, knocking the prince out and taking him away. When they had made their way back, Niven was put in a cage under guard. Tarnum told Niven that he would show him what Erathia was like under the king's leadership, and that if he couldn't change the prince's mind, he would let him go. Tarnum showed him the slaves they had freed, their whip marks and exhaustion, but Niven suspected it was a trick. Their personal stories of torture and pain did little to impress him, so in the end Tarnum showed Niven an Erathian army camp, the dozens of slaves crammed into slave pens, and the score of corpses hanging from the dead trees. When Niven realized the crime his subjects had committed, he was persuaded to aid Tarnum on his quest. When Earl Lambert took Adamina and the other wise woman with him as hostages in exchange for Niven, Tarnum and Niven fought together and freed them. During that offensive, Earl Lambert killed Brelik, but Niven managed to slay the nobleman. During these escapades, Niven and Droglo became fast friends, and while Tarnum finished the rest of the late Earl's forces, Niven returned to Erathia to gather the discontented nobles against his father. In the meantime, Mad King Griffonhard marched his forces around Tarnum's soldiers to stop them from escaping. The rebels were surrounded, outnumbered 10 to 1, and Mad King Griffonhard wasn't taking any prisoners. Using a combination of night raids and guerrilla warfare, Tarnum managed to break the lines of the Mad King's vanguard. In order to gain allies, Tarnum sent Droglo in secret to the barbarians, asking for an alliance. The barbarians demanded twice the payment that Tarnum had offered, and said that if he didn't pay, perhaps the Rathians would. Tarnum felt ashamed at the mercenary attitude of his people, particularly since he was personally responsible for their bloodthirsty and dishonorable ways. Tarnum suggested that the Mudlanders should claim the swamps around them as their own, setting up a homeland. Instead of a king trying to crush a rebellion, Mad King Griffenheart would then be a foreign invader, which would cause him some political problems. Discarding the Mudlander name that had been given to them by outsiders, the wise women decided to call their homeland Tatalia, after an old word for community. Back in Erathia, Niven had gathered the nobles, and they agreed that the Mad King had dragged their once proud nation into dishonor. They assembled in a meeting and named Niven the true king of Erathia, pledging him allegiance. The joint forces of Tatalia and Erathia attacked Mad King Griffenheart's forces and defeated him. Droglo and Niven, as representatives of Tatalia and Erathia, signed a treaty against slavery and an alliance between the two nations. Tarnum knew that Erathia and Tatalia were now in good hands, and that when the ancestors called him away, the people would be safe, and one day the old wounds would have a chance to heal. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, make sure you subscribe on this channel and consider supporting me on Patreon. Leave a comment below to let me know what other parts of Heroes lore you would like to be explored next. Cheers!